Okay, we're in section 6.6 now. This is the last section that is due on Sunday night at midnight. This is going to, the difference between this problem and all the other ones we did in chapter 6 so far is we have an equal sign. Do you see that? If you look back to anything else we did in chapter 6, they never had equal signs. So take note of that. That's kind of a big deal. We have an equal sign. This whole section is equations. We have equal signs now. So what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to go on to get x alone. You always get x alone in an equation. So how do I do it? Well, right here, I have two things with parentheses, right? You see these parentheses? So they're multiplying to equal 0. So think with me logically for a second. If you multiply two things, if you multiply two things and it equals 0, the first thing could be 0 or the second thing could be 0, right? Doesn't that make sense? If the first thing is 0, then 0 times anything would be 0. Or if the second thing is 0, anything times 0 would be 0. So if you're multiplying two things and it's coming out 0, that means the first one could be 0 or the second one could be 0. Well, that's what this is saying here. One thing multiplied by another thing is equaling 0. So the first one could be 0 or the second one could be 0. So then you just solve each of these. How do we solve each of these? You just get x alone, add 6 to both sides. X is 6. Subtract 6 from both sides. X is negative 6. So those are our two answers. I want you to type them in 6, negative 6. Either order, you can put the negative 6 first. I'll just say or. Put the negative 6 first and then the regular 6. Either way, just they want you to type them in with a comma, both answers. They're both answers that make the equation true. There's number 1. Okay, let's look at number 3 here. So number 3, it's the same deal. It equals 0. So we have these equations all throughout this section, 6.6. We have equations. So if they equal 0, that means the first one could be 0 or the second one, right? Because if two things are multiplying to equal 0, then either one could be 0. The first one could be 0 or the second one could be 0. Then we got to solve. How do we get x alone? Divide by 6. Boom. X is 0. Here, add 5. X is 5. So the answers are 0 or 5. And by the way, you can see those are really the answers to the problem. If you put in 0 in both cases, it would make the equation true, wouldn't it? Because 6 times 0 is 0 times what? Negative 5 would equal 0. Or if you put in 5 for x. X can only be one number at a time, so it's either 0 in both cases or 5 in both cases. If it's 5, that'd be 6 times 5, 30 times 5 minus 5. 30 times 0, sure enough, will equal 0. Those are both numbers that make the original equation true. They're solutions. We solved the equation. Okay, so here we go on number 4. Same idea. Two things are timesing to equal 0. So the first one could be 0. Or the second one could be 0. Because if two things multiply to be 0, either one could be 0 to make them times and be 0. Now, just solve each equation. Now, you could add 7 to both sides, and that would get rid of the 7. Could we start skipping some steps? I'm just going to make it quicker for everybody, if I just jump the minus 7 to the other side, it'll become a positive 7, right? That's the same thing as just adding 7 to both sides. It cancels out here and ends up on the other side as a positive. So it's just quicker just to jump it to the other side and switch the sign. Divide by 5. So there's one answer. Same thing here. Just jump the 5 to the other side. Becomes a negative 5 because I really just subtracted 5 from both sides. And then we can divide by 6. Boom. So there's my two answers. 7/5 and minus 5/6. Oh, 5 looks a little funny there. There's the two answers. Okay, so here we are on number 10. I'm jumping ahead to number 10. 8 and 9 will make will be really easy after you've seen number 10 here. So now we have another x squared. Let me give an x squared plan. Here's an x squared with an equal sign plan. What do? Step 1, get a 0. Get a 0 on one side. Doesn't matter which side. Step 2, factor, which means like the two parenthesis kind of thing. Equals 0. And step 3, set each part equals 0. So the first part equals 0, second part equals 0, and then solve. So that's the game plan that you always want to follow whenever you have an x squared with an equal sign. And a good thing to put on your 3x5 card, 3" by 5" card for the exam we're going to take in a few weeks. You can have anything you want written on both sides of a 3x5 card. This would be a great thing, the x squared game plan. All right, let's go through it. Step 1, get a 0. So I'm going to jump this 10 over here, and it'll become x squared minus 9x minus 10, right? When things jump, this positive 10, when he jumps to the other side, he becomes a negative 10. Really, if it bugs you, I just subtracted 10 from both sides. Got rid of it there, made it negative 10 on the other side. That's step 1, get a 0. Step 2, factor. So I got to do the two parentheses. What's going to do that? Well, that's where I do my diamond thing, don't I? Do my diamond. Negative 10, what multiplies to be negative 10, adds to be minus 10. What two numbers multiply to be 10 and can make 9? 1 and 10. What signs? Sign in the bottom goes on the bigger. Minus 10 plus 1 makes minus 9 in the bottom and multiplies to be minus 10, doesn't it? So there it is. X plus 1, x minus 10 equals 0. We took this and factored it. That's step 2, factor. Now, step 3, each part equals 0. So the x plus 1 part equals 0. The x minus 10 part equals 0. And now you just solve. Get x alone. So I just jump this 1. I don't know if that's kind of scribbly if you can read that. Jump that 1 to the other side, negative 1. Jump that 10 to the other side, positive 10. So the answers are negative 1. Whoops, I'm kind of getting scribbly down there. Minus 1. And regular 10. Those are the two answers. Just type them both in with a comma. Either order, doesn't matter. So what do? When you have x squared with an equal sign, get a 0, factor, set each part equal to 0, and solve. Let's try another one. Okay, so here we are in number 12. I skipped number 11. 12 is the same thing, so I'll just show you number 12 here. So remember what we're supposed to do with x squared with an equals. Step 1, get a 0. Well, we've already got that. Step 2, factor. Well, it is already factored, but it turns out it can factor more. How do I know? Well, I'm looking at that x squared. Whenever you have x squared, you think about trying to go a little further with things, right? I'm not going to do anything with this part. He's just x to the first power, so he's done. You know, x to the first power, you can't do anything with that. That's already done. So I'll bring him down. He's good. He's happy. But what about the other part? That part can factor further. So how do we factor it further? Well, you know, that's the slide and divide thing, right? You grab that 2, slide it to the back, becomes x squared minus 9x minus 10. I'm doing slide and divide, right? Whenever you have a number in the front of x squared, you slide it to the back, and then you divide, and then you're going to divide at the end. So first I got to do my what's it called, diamond. So minus 10 here, you're saying what multiplies to be minus 10. It's always multiply to be the back number, add to be the middle. What times what? Multiplies to be 10, so it's going to be 1 and 10. And how do they add to be? My sign in the bottom goes on the bigger, so minus 10 plus 1. Multiplies to be negative 10, adds to be negative 9. That's my pair. So this becomes x plus 1, x minus 1. But now we have to divide. We slid. Now we divide by what? By that same number we slid, 2. So divide by 2, divide by 2. That becomes x plus a half. This one reduces, right? 10 over 2 is just 5. And then, let me clean this up, you slide the 2 back. 2x plus 1. Okay, so there it is all factored. Now bring that other part that was already done back as well. 3x plus 2, and bring down the equal 0. Don't forget that. That's what's different, remember, about this section, 6.6, from all the other sections in Chapter 6. We have an equal sign. We have an equal sign. We never had that before. So keep the equal sign there. That's important. Otherwise, if we didn't have an equal sign, we'd just be done. Just, all right, done. It's all factored, done. But we have an equal, so whenever you have an equals, you have to do a little bit more. What do? Remember the third step? So here's step 2, factor. We did that. Step 3, each one equals 0 and solve. So that means each of these 3, so this one, and this one. So 3x plus 2 is 0, 2x plus 1 is 0, x minus 5 is 0, right? Because these are 3 things multiplying to equal 0. If you're multiplying 3 things to be 0, any one of them can be 0 to make them times out to be 0. Then solve, so each one gets a 0, and then you solve each one. So jump the 2 over here, becomes a minus 2, and then divide by 3. There's one answer. Same thing here, jump the 1 over, minus 1, divide by 2. Boom, jump the 5 over, 5. There's the 3 answers. They want you to separate them with a comma. There they are, 3 answers. So what do we do with x squared? We get a 0, factor, and we saw the x squared thing could factor further, and then each one gets a 0, and solve. All right, let's try number 13. This is problem number 13. So what's the x squared with equals plan or strategy? Step 1, get a 0. Good thing to put in your 3x5 card. Get a 0. So when you see x squared with an equal sign, that's what's new here, right? We have equal signs. We didn't have those earlier in Chapter 6. It's the first time we've had an equal sign. So step 1, get a 0. So jump that 6 over. We'll have 6x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0, right? That 6 jumps over, becomes a minus 6. So there's step 1. Step 2, factor, which means like with the parentheses, right? So how am I going to factor this one? You guys are getting to be pros at factoring now. I've done a lot of factoring. How do we factor this one? We slide and divide, right? This is a slide. Take that 6. Whenever you have a number in the front, like that. Whenever you have a number in the front with 3 terms, I should say. So with 3 terms, x squared, x, no x, 3 terms. When you get a number in the front, you slide it to the back and divide. Slide and divide. So this becomes x squared minus 5x minus 36 is 0. And now you do your diamond method thing. You're looking for negative 36. That's what multiplies and adds to be minus 5. What times what is 36? You can use your calculator, try different numbers. I'm trying to come up with it here. Let's see. Oh, 4 and 9, huh? 4 and 9. And remember, the sign in the bottom goes on the bigger. So the bigger is 9. So plus 4 minus 9 makes minus 5 in the bottom. They multiply to be negative 36. So there's my numbers. So I've got x plus 4, x minus 9. But now we've got to divide. Divide by what? By the number that was in the front that we multiplied to the back. Now divide it. That undoes the multiplying. Divide by the 6. Reduce both those. First off, so that's going to be x plus 2/3, right? And I just divided by 2, top and bottom there, and this one is divide by 3, top and bottom. 3 halves. Keep the equals 0. I'm kind of losing that. Equals 0. I really should have put it right here too. Being a little lazy. Okay, now, last thing, you got to slide this back. 3x plus 2, 2x minus 3. All right, all that's the factoring. Now, what do? Step 3. Each one gets their own 0, and we solve. Each one, because if 2 things are timesing to equal 0, that means either one could be 0. to make that true. So that means 3x plus 2 is 0. 2x minus 3 is 0. So move over the 2. Whoops, kind of messing it up there. 3x is minus 2. Divide by the 3. I'm just like running out of room there. Here, let me try to do a better job on that. Gonna have to squish that in a little bit. So this is 3x plus 2 is 0. Move over the 2. 3x is minus 2. Divide by 3, minus 2/3. Same thing here. 2x minus 3 is 0. Jump over the 3. 2x is 3. Divide by 2. 3 halves. There's the two answers. Minus 2/3, 3 halves. Either order, doesn't matter, separated by a comma. Okay, let's look at number 16 here. Again, we have an x squared and an equal sign. So what's the x squared with an equal sign? Plan. Step 1, get a 0. So let's do that. So that means we got to jump the 5x over there, so it becomes 9x squared minus 5x, right? When something jumps to the other side, it switches its sign. Because I really just subtracted 5x from both sides. So step 1, get a 0. Step 2 is factor. Now, factoring is normally 2 parentheses, but not always. This is a not always case. Like, remember what we're supposed to do first on every, I'll say, or GCF. How about that? Remember, you're supposed to do GCF first. These two have a GCF, don't they? What goes into both these terms? X, right? Take it out. 9x minus 5 equals 0. So that's all. This one's actually an easier factoring because they have something in common. Don't do 2 parentheses, we do GCF. All right, now what do we go from here? What is step 3? Each one gets a 0 and we solve, right? Because 2 things are multiplying to be 0. So in other words, this multiplied with this is equaling 0. So the x alone could be 0. That is the first item. Or the 9x minus 5 could be 0. So this one's done. X is alone. The other one we got to finish solving. Move the 5 over. Becomes positive 5 divided by 9. There's the two answers. 0 and 5/9. Either order, separated by a comma. They're both the answers that make that equation true. That's a 9 there. There we go. Okay, last problem in section 6.6. Got an x squared. Again, so you know the plan. What's the x squared with an equals? Plan. Step 1, get a 0. Now, how am I going to get a 0? Where am I going to get a 0? Well, let's just make this side become 0 since x squared is on the other side. So subtract 37 and add 32x there. Right? That'll be gonzo, gonzo, that'll be 0. Whatever you do to one side, you have no choice but to do the same thing to the other. I'll just line them up where they, here's the wall if that helps you. So minus 37 there under the minus 11, numbers with numbers, and the plus 32x under the 2x, letters with letters. But see how I'm doing the same thing to both sides? Both sides are getting a plus 32x and a minus 37. So I'm doing the same thing to both sides. If the left and the right were equal before and I treat them the same, they have to be equal afterwards. That makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, these cancel and I get 0. That's my first step, get a 0. What's the other side have? 7x squared plus 34x, right? These two make 34x, minus, you can just calculate it here, 48. All right. So now I did step 1, get a 0. What's step 2? Factor, right? The 2 parenthesis factor. So how am I going to factor that thing? It's the way you do when there's a number in the front. Slide and divide, right? Slide and divide. So I'm going to take that 7 in the front, slide it to the back. So that'll be x squared plus 34x minus, what is that? 350 minus 280 and 56, 280. I'm going to have to use my calculator here. I'm getting 336. Okay, 336. It's a big number. And then how do we factor that? You're going to have to do the diamond thing. You want two numbers that multiply to be minus 336 and add to be 34. So minus 336 multiply plus 34 add. What are two numbers? I have no idea. I'm going to try it. So I'm just going to take my calculator right now and take 336 and just start dividing by things. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. See what I get. If I divide by 2, I'm getting 168. Can 2 and 168 make the other term? They're coming from the 336. So the question is, can they make the other term the 34? No way. Not even close. Let's keep going. Divide by 3. You know, I think I'm going to jump down to like 8 because there's no way those small numbers are going to work. So I don't think. I got 8 and 42. Hey, I think that's it. 8 and 42. Yeah, sign and the bottom goes on the bigger, right? 42 minus 8, that's it. Wow, we got lucky. So minus 8 times 42 multiplies to be minus 336, and they add or subtract to be 34. Okay? So just use your calculator. So let's come on down. So now, what does that mean about the factoring? That means that we have x minus 8 and x plus 42 equals 0. But now we got to divide. Divide by what? The number that was in the front. So divide by 7. Divide by 7. This one is going to just become 6. 42 divided by 7 is just 6. The other one, 8 over 7, can't reduce, so it slides back. 7x minus 8. All right, it's all factored. Step 3, each one equals 0, right? So step 2 we factored. Step 3, each one gets its own 0. So the first one is 0, or the second one is 0, bump it over. 7x is 8, divide by 7. Move the 6 over, minus 6. There's our two answers. 8/7 minus 6. All right, that's it for 6.6. Good luck to you on the homework.